Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Bolt Gun. Today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to paint a red plasma glow. At the end of the video I'm going to show you the colours that I'd use for a green, orange and yellow glow. I'm not going to give the full tutorial because it'd be quite similar to what we're doing here, but these are the colours that I'd be using to do those. So the first colour we're going to use is Citadel Mephiston Red. We're going to use this just to give a nice smooth coat onto the plasma coils. So as I said, I'll be showing a picture at the end of the different colours I'd use for different plasma glows. I'm not going to show the whole techniques because it is exactly the same technique as we're using on the blue and the red, but it'll show you the colours that I'd use for those. Now the red's an interesting one in terms of how it ends up looking. If you just carry on adding the white like you do with the blue, you end up with a very pink transition, which to me doesn't look very plasma-y. So what we do instead is we'll be adding a little bit of orange to the red and building up the orange layer, and then adding the white to it to get that glow. So you probably have about 2 or 3 layers of orange before you're adding the white to it. I'm just going to speed this up a little bit just to get to the end, but as long as you've applied a nice smooth red, then I'll be fine. Like so. Next up we're going to shade that. We're going to use Citadel Druchii Violet and just shade all that red. I've left the plasma gun painted with Vallejo Model Air Chrome, which is quite a stark contrast to the red so that you can see how the red looks when you're putting it on. It's currently working on one of my work in progress Death Guard Marines. Like so. Now we're going to gently reapply some Citadel Mephiston Red. So you want to get a tiny little bit on the brush, and then you're just going to kind of wet brush this back onto the coils. If you do fill any of the holes where you've got the shade with the paint, then don't worry about that too much. You can just go back with a little bit of the shade on your brush and refill in those holes afterwards. That's not a problem. What you may find, like on this miniature, is the very top of the plasma gun coils are a little bit shallower than the sides. So when you're putting this colour back on, it can sometimes fill those holes very easily. Like so. Next up, it's a little bit of Fire Dragon Bright from Citadel. We're going to mix this in with the red, just to get a nice little lighter shade. Now we're going to cover this on probably about 90% of the plasma coils. Now with each layer there isn't really a specific amount of area that you should be covering with each colour. So long as it's less than the previous area, that's all you really need. When you're doing these colours, it's worth thinking about if you have the shades of red very close together, then it's going to look like a very sharp contrast between the light and the dark. However, if you space them out too much, then you're going to have a really noticeable difference between the light and the dark as well. So what you're trying to do is find a happy medium where you've got enough of the different shades showing through to give that a smooth blend across. And hopefully we'll manage that by the end of this video. Once again, we're going to be adding a little more Citadel Fire Dragon Bright to the mix. We're going to cover slightly less area than the previous one. And once again, we're going to be using a little bit more Fire Dragon Bright. Add that to slightly less of the coils than the previous one too. Now we're moving on to the white layers. So we're adding a little bit of white to the Mephiston red and the orange mix. You're just going to gently brush that onto the coils. You can see the glow starting to appear there. Like so. Now we're going to add a little bit more white to the mix and do another highlight to that. Now this is maybe slightly too light compared to how I would like to have done it, but it works just as well. I'll let you know a little technique at the end where if you have mixed too much white into the mix and your shades go too dark to too light quickly, there's a little cheating method I'll show you at the end that you can use. So we're going to add a little bit more white to that mix and give that another highlight. So when you come to the end of the plasma coils and you've finished them, what you may find is that you've made the dark to light a bit too rapid, so it looks like quite a sharp contrast, so there's no real gradual change. What you can do just to cheat a little bit with that is, rather than paint the whole thing again, if you use a tiny little bit of Citadel Carroburg Crimson and just gently edge that up the side of the glow, you can get that going from dark to light using the crimson. So adding a little bit more white to the mix again. I'm just going to do slightly less once again. So you can see that glow starting to appear there. So this final layer is Vallejo Pure White. You're just going to do the final highlight on the coils. Once again, if you do put a little bit too much on there, just touch up the very edges of it with Carroburg Crimson, and that will blend it in nicely together. You'll see that on the pictures at the end. So that is the finished painted highlight that you can see on there. You can just see on these next two pictures where I've used a tiny little bit of Carroburg Crimson to blend out that white glow and blend it into the red a little bit better. So this here is the colours that I would use if I was doing an orange, green or yellow plasma glow. And then you've got the colour, you've got the shade, and you've got the white where you'd be lightening the colours at the end. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.